Ever look at your life and wonder, where's all the money gone? You work hard, you try to get ahead. This is America after all, the land of prosperity. But it has been and can be a struggle for most Americans, particularly young people. Washington Post had an article on June 23rd titled, "Millennials had it bad financially, but Gen Z may have it worse." It says, Gen Z is coming of age at a very different time from millennials, whose early days in the workforce coincided with 2 recessions. Many struggled to get jobs, particularly following the Great Recession, when the nation's unemployment rate hovered around 10% for over a year. On average, millennials lost about 13% of their earnings between 2007 and 2017, according to economist Kevin Freeman. By contrast, the recovery since the pandemic has been swift and broad. Unemployment was under 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years, and younger workers have seen some of the largest pay hikes. Still, rising prices are dealing an outsized blow to Gen Z. Compared with other age groups, adults under 27 devote more of their spending to basics like housing, dining out, gas, and car insurance, all of which have gone far pricier in recent years. Data from Moody's shows. We're at an inflection point. Gen Z is coming of age in a time of rising inflation and rising interest rates, and that will stay with them, said Jimmy Lentz, a financial economics professor at Duke University. There's the immediate impact, higher monthly payments on your credit card, but there are also going to be long-term impacts, like it's going to be harder to buy a home. Does this mean the American dream is dead? Will the boomers be the last generation to enjoy prosperity? I sure hope not. Join me in the Economic War Room, where we will look at 10 ways you're being made poorer and what you can do about it. We will ask and answer the big question, why aren't you rich? More to life than money. That's absolutely true, but you are among the hundreds of millions of Americans wondering, is the American dream dead? Does it still work? You try to get ahead, but it's really hard. You only have yourself to blame, right? No, I'm here to tell you it's not all your fault, at least not entirely. In fact, there are 10 powerful forces holding you back, and you directly control only one of them. Yes, you have a part to play, and there are things you can do today that will make a difference for your future. But before I dive into the 10 things holding you back, let's start with 3 universal truths that you must understand before you can identify and remove the terrible 10. First, you must understand that liberty and prosperity go hand in hand. The greater the liberty, the greater the prosperity. And by contrast, where there is no individual liberty, there is no prosperity. This has been demonstrated repeatedly by history. The American experiment was one of individual liberty. The Soviet Union was the opposite. When China, communists, began allowing individual liberty, China prospered. Hong Kong was once considered the freest place on earth. It was also the most prosperous. Since China cracked down on individual liberty, Hong Kong has lost ground. This will make perfect sense when we walk through the terrible 10. Now, the second underlying truth for our discussion is that government has no money. Everything a government spends has to be taken from someone else, either in the form of taxes or borrowing. And the third truth is that if you live beyond your means, you will never prosper. All 3 should seem obvious, but we ignore these basic truths daily in our politics and in our personal life. Given that understanding, let's walk through the 10 ways you're being made poorer, and then we'll look for solutions. Our goal is to help you and every American prosper. 1, let's start with regulation. This is a big one, and it costs more than you might imagine. Now, I'm all for smart regulation that keeps the air clean and the water pure, but we all know that there are a lot of rules that simply don't make much sense. It reminds me of the Simpsons cartoon where Homer crusaded for a stop sign at a dangerous intersection. It made perfect sense. It was a great idea, but he didn't stop there. Pretty soon, he had all kinds of laws and rules in place, most of which were ridiculous. And then, at the end of the episode, he gets bought off by Montgomery Burns, the owner of the nuclear power plant. This is absolutely a case of art imitating life. Many regulations have started simple, like Homer's stop sign, but then regulators have to justify their work, so they add more regulations that increasingly make less and less sense. Finally, there's regulatory capture, where those writing the rules become beholden to the very industries that they're trying to regulate. What this means is that the rules start to protect existing businesses and they keep out any competition. Just think about all the rules we had to follow during COVID. Small stores were not allowed to open, but big box retailers could. That's an example of regulatory capture where the rules favor big companies over individuals. There are other examples. Let's take what it means to be an Uber driver. You own your own business. You set your own hours. Pretty sweet, right? Except in California, where on June 10th of this year, an 11-judge panel just overturned the will of the voters, demanding that Uber drivers be treated as employees rather than independent business people. There are 1.4 million workers in California doing app-based driving. This new regulation, combined with the government's attempt to invalidate Prop 22 passed 4 years ago, could put an end to independent contractors. This will mean less individual liberty and thus less prosperity. Uber works because it has independent drivers. Take that away and you revert to taxi cabs. The innovation will be gone and employees will care less about giving you good service on your next ride. But how does this make you poorer? Two ways. First, with less innovation and competition, prices go higher, costing you more money. And second, regulation means less opportunity and thus impacts your earnings potential. The amounts can be staggering. For example, one tweaking of the air quality rules, making standards far more extreme than they are even in Europe, would cost Americans 1 million manufacturing jobs, according to Jay Timmons, President and CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers. The rule that will cost 1 million jobs lowers the air quality allowance for fine particulates from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9 micrograms per cubic meter. That sounds okay in principle, but what it means in practice is that manufacturers will close American plants and open in countries with no standards. The same goods will be produced, the air on planet Earth will be worse, and America will lose 1 million jobs. That means less liberty, less prosperity. Oh, and the globalists will profit because it's cheaper to manufacture where the standards are lower. Montgomery Burns wins again. Never fear, however. The new regulatory burden under President Biden will keep us busy. Not only will there be more government jobs, but all the rest of us will spend a total of 10.34 billion hours with the new federal paperwork, the equivalent of 15,000 lifetimes. According to a congressional report, President Obama added over $500 billion in regulatory costs per year. President Biden has added over $600 billion per year. There's a little bit of good news in the report because President Trump actually lowered the burden by about $300 billion per year. And we'll put a link to this full report in our economic battle plan. This year after year of new regulations certainly adds up over time. For example, just the manufacturing regulations alone in the year 2022 cost over $3 trillion, about 12% of our entire economy. One estimate is that the regulatory cost per employee is about $12,800 per year. Just imagine if everyone got a $12,800 raise tax-free. Regulations are just the first of our 10 reasons. Stay tuned through the break, and we will cover the other 9. We'll be back right after this break. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Oh, hi, I'm Kevin Freeman, and I'm here to tell you about coffee. Well, not really, but I'm going to use coffee to illustrate my point. Here we have several different coffees, each with its own unique characteristics. First, we have instant coffee. This coffee pretends to be coffee, but it's not really coffee at all. It's a fraud. Plus, it tastes terrible. I'm out. Next, we have woke coffee. Their coffee actually tastes pretty good, until you find out that when you drink it, you have to admit that you've oppressed other coffees in the past. Insanity, I'm out. Next, we have Big Tech Coffee. Now, these guys used to encourage folks to share with others what they thought about their coffee. But now, if you say you don't like Big Tech Coffee, they'll take away your coffee pot. I'm out. This brings us to Patriot Mobile Coffee, right? This is one big cup of truth and freedom. There's no fraud here. Patriot Mobile is America's real Christian conservative wireless provider. Patriot Mobile gives back millions of dollars every year to organizations that are on the front lines fighting for our freedoms. Patriot Mobile offers the best nationwide 4G and 5G coverage on the same networks as the other major carriers. So you'll get the same great coverage, along with 100% US-based customer support, while knowing you are supporting a company that shares your conservative values. Switch to Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
Regulations make things cost more and you get fewer choices. You can no longer buy incandescent light bulbs. You may soon only be able to buy electric appliances, and higher standards often mean that manufacturers use lower quality materials to offset costs. Ever wonder why your grandma's refrigerator lasted 30 years, but your 6-year-old model is falling apart? Reason Magazine published a study 11 years ago that showed that federal regulations made each of us 75% poorer. Our economy then was just $16 trillion. And if regulations had been held at the level of 60 years earlier, rather than expanding every year, the average American salary would be $330,000 rather than the $53,000 it was in 2009. Now it's about $64,000 today. I think it's safe to say two things. First, I know that some of those regulations were sensible, so you might not get the whole $330,000. But that was based on an estimated earnings in 2009. With all the added regulations under Obama and Biden since then, the number is likely even higher today. So who's to say you wouldn't be making at least $250,000 or more if we reduced the regulatory burden today? Here's the sad truth. The Biden team wants more regulation, not less. When we opened the show, we explained that the greater the individual liberty, the greater the prosperity. Regulations reduce both liberty and prosperity. Regulations enrich government while making you poorer. By the way, sometimes regulations are put in place by the industry first and then later adopted into rules by the government. That's the case with ESG. You know, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard have been pushing the private economy and companies to add environment regulations and things like that. Well, that sets up barriers and profit-making opportunities for the big companies. And they get the rest of us to go along with it. This is what I call crony capitalism. Just one example can be seen at ExxonMobil, where an activist investor captured board seats on the board of America's largest energy company. The new board members were infamous, wanting Exxon to get out of the oil business, which would force every other company out of oil. But oil is their business. If activist board members succeed with their plans, that would bankrupt Exxon, costing workers jobs and investors their investment. One author estimates that anti-climate change rules alone will transfer $100 trillion from the rest of us to the wealthy. Wonder why you're poorer? These are the same sorts of rules and activists as those that were pushing for DEI, where companies do race-based hiring rather than looking for the best and most productive workers regardless of race or gender. A study by our friends at Red Balloon documented that DEI actually hurts performance. Now, the second way that you're being made poorer, surprisingly, is the way Social Security works. Yes, I'm talking about one of the biggest government programs ever, the one that takes 15% of your paycheck every month when you count both Social Security and Medicare. Now, you pay half directly and your employer pays the other half, at least on the first $168,600 you earn in 2024. But what if the money didn't just go straight to the federal government? What if instead it had been invested in a growing economy and not just government debt? While comparisons obviously depend on the time period, it does appear that private investments would in general have performed much better over the past. Will that be true in the future? Of course, there's no way to tell. And I have to be very careful here. I'm not acting as a financial advisor. I don't know your situation. It would be wrong to disparage government bonds. But you can see a table published by the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College that shows a comparison of returns between private investing and government T-bills. Of According to this, the S&P 500 from 1928 to 2022 returned almost 10% a year versus 3.3% for 3-month Treasury bills. If you held a standard 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, over a typical 40-year work career, and you got the average returns, you would have grown your investment at a 7.6% annual rate with private investments as compared to the 3.3% annual return provided by Treasury bills, which is what the Social Security system is supposed to hold. Would that make a difference in your retirement? Absolutely. But the difference is hard to calculate. I have to say that. But let's simplify the terms and admit there are a lot of factors at play, including stocks and bonds can be risky. T-bills are considered the safest of assets, but if calculated out, you get 2.9 times as much ending value from a private investment as you do from Social Security. Can you imagine if your Social Security checks would be nearly triple what they otherwise will be? This is the number 2 way you're being made poorer. The average Social Security check is a little less than $1,800 a month. And if you tripled that, you'd have over $5,000 a month. And that's roughly in line with the average American earnings. In other words, workers would be able to retire at age 65 getting just as much as their average paycheck. And that's just Social Security. Now, the number 3 way you're being made poorer is health care costs. You probably already know that health insurance often drives prices higher, and you foot the bill. Remember the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare? Well, health costs have skyrocketed since it was enacted, taking an ever-increasing share of Americans' income. Just ask yourself, are you paying more or less for insurance? Have your deductibles gone up or down? According to nonpartisan studies, the cost of premiums and deductibles takes over 10% of workers' income in most states and is growing faster than incomes. Heritage Foundation says that the cost of health insurance doubled in the decade after Obamacare was enacted. Why? Red tape and mandates. Did you know the government sued a bunch of nuns because their health insurance didn't cover abortions? Never mind that abortion is against their faith. These nuns are celibate by vow. And the truth is that most medical procedures are cheaper if you pay cash rather than use insurance. Often, it's cheaper to pay cash for a service than even to pay the deductible. Really? It all comes down to third-party, one-size-fits-all payments. And have you noticed that you never get a price before you have a procedure? According to the National Institute of Health paper that was just published, forcing hospitals and doctors to explain their costs in advance would lower costs overall by a lot and maybe improve results. If we cut your medical bills in half, would you have more money? Of course! That's why our present healthcare system is making you poorer. We need transparency and free market competition. As things stand now, excessive healthcare costs are the leading cause of bankruptcy for American families. Now, that's just 3 of our 10 things that are making you poorer. We're going to have to pick up the pace to cover all 10. Number 4 is obvious. It's inflation coming from unsound money. Just since 1971, the dollar's lost 90% of its purchasing power. Just since Biden became president, it's lost 20% according to official government data. You feel it every time you eat out, buy gas, groceries, or pay rent. In fact, prices are up more than 20% for the things you use most, and the increases are much greater than any raises you may have gotten. That's gasoline, eggs, airfare, baby food, electricity, all up over 20%. In California, they raised the minimum wage to $20 an hour. But to offset the costs, McDonald's now charges $15 for a Big Mac meal in Los Angeles. And a lot of restaurants are closing because they can't afford higher wages without raising prices. The iconic Arby's on Sunset Boulevard closed after 55 years for minimum wages. Now, we have to take another break. When we come back, we'll wrap up on inflation and then cover the rest of the points making you poorer. Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. You know, it's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. You know, pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com.
I'm Kevin Sorbo. When you spend money, you consider who you're buying from and the causes they support? If you don't, then you're likely supporting companies that are trying to destroy our country and take away our freedoms. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a cell phone company and a good one. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks along with 100% US-based customer support. But here's the deal. Patriot Mobile's mission has nothing to do with cell phones. They carry out their mission by giving back millions of dollars every year to Christian conservative causes that are actively engaged in the fight to save America. Voting is no longer enough to beat the woke. We have to band together, support like-minded companies, and vote with our dollars. That's how we win. Stop supporting companies that want to destroy America and join Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
Before the break, we talked about inflation. And the government's answer to that? We'll just raise the minimum wage. But that doesn't help workers. It sounds good on paper, but it creates a wage price spiral that quickly gets out of hand. It makes it impossible to stay in business or start a new business, so everybody loses quickly. Understand why you're poor yet? That's just half the reasons. Number 6 is open borders. The cost to our society is enormous. Just look at the border towns of the so-called sanctuary cities. You're paying for mass immigration in multiple ways. First, there are the direct government costs that come from you in taxes. According to a report from the U.S. House in May of 2024, we're directly spending at least $150 billion per year and maybe as much as $400 billion. That works out to somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 per family per year. And those are just the direct costs. And they're even reduced by the taxes that illegal immigrants pay. What about the cost of losing your job to a cheaper employee who is here illegally? The point is, having a border plan would enhance the wealth of average Americans. Immigration is good, but we can't afford open borders. Reason number 7, the war on poverty. It's making you poorer. That's ironic, isn't it? I don't have time to get into all the details, but here's a snapshot. In 60 years since Lyndon Johnson began a war on poverty, we've spent over $30 trillion fighting it. Unfortunately, the welfare payments that we have made have actually incentivized the breakup of families and funded people to stay out of the workforce. And yet, the simple way to beat poverty, according to the Brookings Institute, comes from following 3 simple rules. To avoid poverty, 1, at least finish high school. 2, get a full-time job. And 3, wait until age 21 to get married and have children. Sadly, our war on poverty approach has broken families and failed to help people get a job or finish high school, and it has cost our society $30 trillion, creating the majority of our massive debt buildup. Did you know, according to usdebtclock.org, your personal share of our national debt is over $100,000? A family of 4 has a $400,000 share. Are you feeling poorer yet? Reason number 8 is crony capitalism. There's the government kind, where members of Congress can use a form of insider trading to make themselves rich at your expense. And then there's the Wall Street kind, where the bankers and brokers keep the gravy for themselves and their elite clients with the government's help. Let's start with Congress. Did you know that members of Congress can vote for stuff while investing in companies that benefit? No wonder people go to Congress. They get there broke and they emerge wealthy. But how does that make you poorer? It sort of rigs the system, and Wall Street goes along. The other type of cronyism comes when Wall Street takes all the cream before they let you invest. Case in point, Uber. I mentioned it earlier. This is a great concept unless regulations mess it up. But when Uber came public, the private equity investors had already taken most of the gains. Uber launched in March 2009, and almost every respect, it was better than a taxi. 10 years later, the company went public, giving average investors their first chance to own shares. But if you bought it when it first came public, you lost money for the next 4 years. But those who were allowed to invest early made billions, and that's an important point. Regulations limit private equity investments to accredited investors only. Most of us don't qualify. The cream is already taken by the time you get a chance to invest. Now, that wasn't the case when I was younger. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and so many other companies went public early at low valuations. But crony capitalism and regulations have made that really rare today. As a result, you're less likely to become wealthy. Reason number 9 comes from politicians buying votes, selling out your future. Case in point, President Biden's efforts to pay off student debt even after the Supreme Court told him, no, don't do it. What's so unfair is that everyone who receives student debt forgiveness will still have to pay for it with higher taxes. But at least they got college. What about those who have to pay in taxes but get no benefit? And that's a lot of money. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the latest official estimates show taxpayers will spend $393 billion on this federal student loan program, about $3,100 per household over 10 years. Remember what we said at the opening of this program? The government has no money. It either takes it from you as taxes or it borrows and pays interest where your kids have to pay the taxes. So how can a government provide free college? It can't. Someone has to pay for it. Forgiving student debt means we all pay for it, whether we go to college or not. Just overall government debt, now $35 trillion, is making you poorer because it's taking so much money out of the economy. Without this massive government borrowing, interest rates would be substantially lower. This is known as the crowding out theory. Higher interest rates were the largest contributing factor, causing average mortgage payments to jump from $15,000 a year to $25,000 a year. Would an extra $10,000 help you? Of course it would. Finally, the number 10 reason that most people aren't wealthy: they live beyond their means. So they go into debt rather than saving and investing. That's our third truth. If you put $6,500 in an IRA every year, the maximum allowed, starting at age 25, and kept it invested at the average rate of return of the past 100 years, about 7.6%, you'd accumulate $1.5 million by age 65. Now, I have to make the point, there are no guarantees with an IRA. No one's predicting the future. I'm not advising you and all that. Yeah, here's the bottom line. If you put more money away and spent less than your means, you would be wealthier. We just outlined 10 ways that you're made poorer. Just one of those meant that your income is 75% lower than it should be. If all the terrible 10 were all addressed, you might be earning 5 times or more than you're earning now. America has sadly become a bloated bureaucracy with cronies and phonies running things. Remember the truths. First, the greater the liberty, the greater the prosperity. Second, governments don't have money. What they pay out and give away, they take from you, or they borrow, which means they take from your kids. And third, you can't prosper when you live beyond your means. Living beyond your means is a formula for failure. Given the terrible 10, here's what you can do. First, get control of your finances. Delay gratification. Save to buy. Number 2, we live in a republic, and we get to elect our representatives using democratic means. Study the candidates. Vote for those who support individual liberty. Of the 10 ways you're made poorer, 9 of them are connected to government policies. Number 3, spread the word. Next time you hear someone say they want to vote for a candidate because he or she offers free this or that, enlighten them. Free healthcare isn't free. Someone pays for it, and probably a lot more than they should. It's going to take a great revelation to get the masses off the government dole, but we're all poorer as a result. And number 4, help us pass pirate money legislation. It'll give you an opt-out from a declining dollar. You'll be able to have your own personal gold and silver standard, and you won't have to fear inflation. Read my Pirate Money book, and you'll learn more. Now, we're going to take and summarize all of this in our free economic battle plan. We'll walk through points number 1 through 10 and tell you what you can do about it. You can sign up for and get a free copy at economicwarroom.com. We're here to help you prosper and be successful. You're being made poorer by government and your own bad decisions, and we have a formula to help get out of that. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies, even inside the government, they view it as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.